Elon Musk, Chapter 13, The Coup, PayPal, September 2000. Street fight. By late summer of 2000, Levitine found Musk increasingly difficult to deal with. He wrote Musk long memos outlining how fraud was threatening to bankrupt the company. One of them incongruously titled Fraud is Love, but all he got in response were terse dismissals. When Levitine developed the first commercial use of CAPTCHA technology to prevent automated fraud, Musk showed little interest. It had an extremely depressive effect on me, Levitine says. He called his girlfriend to say, "I think I'm done." Sitting in the lobby at the Palo Alto Hotel, where he was attending a conference, Levitine told a few colleagues of his plans to leave. They urged him instead to fight back. Others had similar frustrations. His close friends Peter Thiel and Luke Nosek had secretly commissioned a study that showed the PayPal brand had much more valuable than X.com. Musk was furious and ordered the PayPal brand to be stripped from most of the company's website. By early September, all three, along with Reid Hoffman and David Sachs, had decided it was time to dethrone Musk. Musk had married Justine 8 months earlier, but he had not found time to go on a honeymoon. Fatefully, he decided to take one that September, just when his colleagues were plotting against him. He flew to Australia to attend the Olympics. Which stops to meet potential investors with stops in London and Singapore. As soon as he left, Levitine telephoned Thiel and asked if he would come back as CEO, at least on a temporary basis. When Thiel said yes, the rebel group agreed to join hands and confront the board, enlisting other employees to sign a petition supporting their cause. Thus, armed and fortified, Thiel and Levitine and their company and their compatriots caravanned up Sand Hill Road to Sequoia Capital's office to present their case to Michael Maurice. Maurice thumbed through the folder with the petition, then asked some specific questions about the software and fraud problems. He agreed that a change was necessary, but said he would support Thiel as CEO only if it was temporary. The company needed to begin a process of recruiting a seasoned top executive. The plotters agreed and headed off to a local dive bar, Antonio's Nut House, to celebrate. Musk began to sense a problem during some of his phone calls from Australia. As usual, he would issue command decisions, but now his normally cowed lieutenants began pushing back. He figured out why 4 days into his trip, when he was copied on an email sent to the board by an employee who had extolled Musk's leadership and denounced the plotters. Musk felt blindsided. This whole thing is making me so sad that words failed me, he emailed, "I have given away every last ounce of effort, almost all my cash from Zip2, and put my marriage on the rocks. And yet I stand accused of bad deeds to which I have not even given an opportunity to respond." Musk called Maurice to try to reverse his decision. He described the coup as being heinous, says Maurice, who has a refined literature sensibility. I remember because most people don't use this word. He labeled it as a heinous crime. When Maurice refused to back down, Musk quickly bought plane tickets. The only seats he and Justine could get were in coach and headed home. When he got back to the ex-office, he huddled with some of his loyalists to figure out what was way to fend off the coup. After a session that lasted late into the night, he retreated to the video game consoles in the office and played round after round of Street Fighter by himself. Thiel warned executives not to answer Musk's calls. He would be too persuasive or intimidating, but Reid Hoffman, the chief operator, felt he owed Musk a conversation. A bear-like entrepreneur with a jovial personality, Hoffman knew Musk's wiles. He has the reality warp powers where people get sucked into his vision, he says. Nevertheless, he decided to meet Musk for lunch. The lunch lasted 3 hours as Musk tried to persuade and cajole Hoffman. "I took all of my money and put it in this company," he said. "I had the right to run it." He also argued against the strategy of focusing just on electronic payments. That should be only an opening act for creating a real digital bank. He had read Clayton Christensen's book, The Innovator's Dilemma, and tried to convince Hoffman that the state banking industry could be disrupted. Hoffman disagreed. I told him that I believed his vision of a super bank was toxic because we needed to focus on our payment service on eBay. He says Musk then switched tacks. He tried to persuade Hoffman to become the CEO. Eager to end the lunch, Hoffman agreed to think about it, but quickly decided he wasn't interested. He was a Thiel loyalist. When the board voted to remove Musk as CEO, he responded with a calm and grace that surprised those who had watched his feverish struggle to prevail. I've decided that the time has come to bring in a seasoned CEO to take X.com to the next level, he wrote in an email to his fellow workers. After that search is done, my plan is to take a sabbatical for 3 to 4 months, think through a few ideas, and then start a new company. Although a street fighter, Musk had an unexpected ability to be realistic in defeat. When Jeremy Stoppelman, a Musk acolyte who would later be founder of Yelp, asked whether he and others should resign in protest, Musk said no. Excuse me. The company was my baby, and like the mother in a book of Solomon, I was willing to give it up so it could survive, Musk says. I decided to work at repairing the relationship with Peter and Max. The one remaining source of tension was Musk's desire, as he put it in his email, to do some PR. He had been bitten by the celebrity bug and wanted to do a public face of the company. I'm really the best spokesperson for the company, he said. He told Thiel during a tense meeting in Morit's office. When Thiel rejected the idea, Musk erupted. I don't want to have my honor implied, he shouted. Excuse me. My honor is worth more than this company is to me. Thiel was baffled about why this was a matter of honor. He was very dramatic. Thiel recalls, people don't usually talk with such a superheroic, almost hemorrhagic kind of vibe in Silicon Valley. Musk remained the largest shareholder and member of the board, but Thiel barred him from speaking for the company. Risk seeker. For the second time in 3 years, Musk had been pushed out of a company. He was a visionary, but didn't play well with others. What struck his colleagues at PayPal, in addition to his relentlessness and rough personal style, was his willingness, even desire, to take risks. Entrepreneurs are actually not risk takers, said Roelof Botha. They're risk-minded takers. They don't thrive on risk. They never seek to amplify it. Instead, they try to figure out the controllable variables and minimize their risks. But not Musk. He was into amplifying risk and banning the boats so we could never retreat from it. To both of Musk's McLaren crash was like a metaphor. Floor and see how fast it goes. That made Musk fundamentally different from Thiel, who always focused on limiting risks. He and Hoffman once planned to write a book on their experience at PayPal. The chapter on Musk was going to be titled The Man Who Didn't Understand the Meaning of the Word Risk. Risk addition can be useful when it comes to driving people to do what seems impossible. He's amazingly successful getting people to march across the desert, Hoffman says. He has a level of certainty that causes him to put all of his chips on the table. That was more than just a metaphor. Many years later, Levitine was at a friend's bachelor pad hanging out with Musk. Some people were playing a high-stakes game of Texas Hold'em. Although Musk was not a card player, he pulled up to the table. There were all these nerds and sharpsters who were good at memorizing cards and calculating odds, Levitine says. Elon just proceeded to go all in on every hand and lose. Then he would buy more chips and double down. Eventually, after losing many hands, he went all in and won. Then he said, right, fine, I'm done. It would be a theme of his life. Avoid taking chips off the table, keep risking them. That would turn out to be a good strategy. Look at the two companies he went on to build, SpaceX and Tesla, says Thiel. Silicon Valley wisdom would be that those were both incredibly crazy bets. But if two crazy companies worked that everyone thought wouldn't possibly work, then you say to yourself, I think Elon understands something about risk that everybody else doesn't. PayPal went public in early 2002 and was acquired by eBay that July for 1.5 billion. Musk's payout was around 250 million. Afterward, he called up his nemesis, Max Levchin, and suggested they get together in the company parking lot. Levchin, a small, wiry guy who had occasionally harbored vague fears that Musk might one day beat him up, replied half jokingly, "You want to have a fist fight behind the school?" But Musk was sincere. He sat on the curb looking sad and asked Levchin, "Why did you turn on me?" "I honestly believed it was the right thing to do," Levchin replied. "You were completely wrong. The company was about to die. I felt I had no other choice." Musk nodded. A few months later, they had dinner in Palo Alto. "Life's too short," Musk told him. "Let's move on." He did the same with Peter Thiel, David Sachs, and some of the other coup leaders. "I was pretty angry at first," Musk told me in the summer of 2022. "I had thoughts of assassination running through my head. But eventually I realized that it was good I got cooped. Otherwise, I'd still be slaving away at PayPal." Then he paused for a few moments and he let out a little laugh. "Of course, if I had stayed, PayPal would be $1 trillion company." There was a coda. At the time of this conversation, Musk was in the midst of buying Twitter as we walked in front of the high bay where his Starship's rocket was being prepared for the test. He returned to the topic of what his grand vision for X.com had been. "That's what Twitter could become," he said. "If you combine a social network with payments platform, you could create what I wanted X.com to be." Malaria. Musk's ouster as PayPal CEO allowed him to have a true vacation, the first time that he had a week-long holiday from work. It would also be the last time. He was not made for vacations. Along with Justine and Kimball, he went to Rio to see his cousins Russ Reeve, who had moved down there after marrying a Brazilian woman. From there, they went to South Africa to attend a wedding of another relative. It was Musk's first time back after leaving the country 11 years earlier at age 17. Justine had a tough time dealing with Elon's father and grandmother, known as Nana. She had gotten a henna tattoo of a gecko on her leg while in Rio and had not yet faded. Nana told Elon that she was a Jezebel, referring to the biblical woman whose name became associated with sexually promiscuous or controlling women. "That was the first time I'd ever even heard of a woman refer to another woman as a Jezebel," Justine says. "I guess the taboo of the gecko didn't help. They escaped Pretoria as soon as they could for safari at a high-end game preserve. After getting back to Palo Alto in January 2001, Musk started feeling dizzy. His ears were ringing and he had recurrent waves of chills, so he went to the Stanford Hospital emergency room where he started throwing up. A spinal tap showed he had a high white blood cell count, which led to the doctors to diagnose him with viral meningitis. It's generally not a severe disease, so the doctors rehydrated him and sent him home. Over the next few days, he felt progressively worse and at one point was so weak he could barely stand. So he called a taxi and went to the doctor. When she tried to take his pulse, it was barely perceptible, so she called an ambulance, which took him to Sequoia Hospital in Redwood City. A doctor who was an expert in infectious disease happened to walk past Musk's bed and realized that he had malaria, not meningitis. It turned out to be Phallocoparum malaria, the most dangerous form, and they had caught it just in time. After symptoms became severe, as they had in Musk's case, patients often had only a day or so before the parasite becomes untreatable. He was put into intensive care where doctors stabbed a needle into his chest for intravenous infusions followed by massive doses of doxycycline. The head of human resources at X.com went to visit Musk in the hospital and sort out his health insurance. He was actually only hours from death, the executive wrote in the email to Thiel and Levchin. His doctor had treated 2 cases of Flammarian malaria prior to treating Elon. Both patients died. Phil remembers that he had a morbid conversation with the HR director after learning that Musk had taken out, on behalf of the company, a key man life insurance policy of $100 million. If he had died, Thiel says, all of our financial problems were going to be solved. It was typical of Musk's organized personality to take out such a large insurance policy. We're happy that he survived, and that gradually everything tracked for the company, so we didn't need the 100 million life insurance policy. Musk remained in intensive care for 10 days and did not fully recover for 5 months. He took 2 lessons from his near death experience. Vacations will kill you. Also, South Africa, that place is still trying to destroy me. Chapter 14, Mars, SpaceX, 2001. Flying. After his ouster from PayPal, Musk bought a single-engine turboprop and decided to learn how to fly, like his father and grandparents had done. In order to get his pilot's license, he needed 50 hours of training, which he crammed into 2 weeks. I tend to do things very intensely, he says. He had an easy time with the visual flight rules test, but he failed his first instrument flight rules test. You have a hood on so you can't see outside, and you have half your instruments covered, he says. Then they shut down one engine, and you have to land the plane. I landed it, but the instructor said not good enough, fail. On the second try, he passed. That emboldened him to take the crazy step of buying a Soviet bloc military jet in Czechoslovakia called the Aero L-39 Albatros. It's what they use to train their fighter pilots. So it's incredible acrobatic, he says, but it's a bit dicey even for me. At one point, he and his trainer took it on a low altitude flight over Nevada. It was just like in Top Gun. You're no more than a couple 100 feet above the ground, following the contour of the mountains. We did a vertical climb up the side of the mountain and then turned upside down. The flying appealed to his daredevil gene. It also helped me visualize aerodynamics better. It's not just a simple Bernoulli's principle, he says it as he launches into an explanation of how wings lift a moving plane. After about 500 hours of flying in the L-39 and other planes, he got a bit bored with it, but the allure of the flight remained. Red Planet. On Labor Day weekend of 2001, soon after he had recovered from malaria, Musk went to visit his party pal from Penn, Adio Racy, in the Hamptons. Afterward, driving back to Manhattan on the Long Island Expressway, they talked about what Musk would do next. I've always wanted to do something in space, he told Racy, but I don't think there's anything that an individual can do. It was too expensive, of course, for a private person to build a rocket. Or was it? Exactly what were the basic physical requirements? All that was needed. Musk figured was metal and fuel. Those didn't really cost that much. By the time we reached Midtown Tunnel, Racy says, we decided that it was possible. When he got to his hotel that evening, Musk logged into the NASA website to read about its plans for going to Mars. I figured it had to be soon because we went to the moon in 1969, so we must be about to go to Mars. When he couldn't find the schedule, he rummaged deeper on the site until he realized that NASA had no plans for Mars. He was shocked. In his Google searches for more information, he happened across an announcement for a dinner in Silicon Valley hosted by an organization called the Mars Society. That sounds cool, he said to Justine, and he bought a pair of $500 tickets. In fact, he ended up sending in a check for $5,000, which caught the attention of Robert Zubrin, the society's president. Zubrin sat Elon and Justine at his table, along with the film director James Cameron, who had directed the space war thriller Aliens, as well as the Terminator and Titanic. Justine sat next to him. It was a big thrill for me because I was a huge fan, but he mainly talked to Elon about Mars and why humans would be doomed if they didn't colonize other planets. Okay. Musk now had a new mission, one that was loftier than launching an internet bank or digital yellow pages. He went to Palo Alto Public Library to read about rocket engineering and started calling experts asking to borrow their old engine manuals. At a gathering of PayPal alumni in Las Vegas, he sat in a cabana by the pool reading a tattered manual for a Russian rocket engine. When one of the alums, Mark Woolley, asked him what he planned to do next, Musk answered, I'm going to colonize Mars. My mission in life is to make mankind a multiplanetary civilization. Woolway's reaction was unsurprising. Dude, you're bananas. Reid Hoffman, another PayPal veteran, had a similar reaction after listening to Musk describe the plan to send rockets to Mars. Hoffman was puzzled. How is this a business? He asked. Later, Hoffman would realize that Musk didn't think that way. What I didn't appreciate is that Elon starts with a mission and later finds a way to backfill in order to make it work financially, he says. That's what makes him a force of nature. Why? It's useful to pause for a moment and note how wild it was for a 30-year-old entrepreneur who had been ousted from two tech startups to decide to build rockets that could go to Mars. What drove him, other than an aversion to vacations and a childlike love of rockets, sci-fi, and a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, to his bemused friends at the time and consistently in conversations over the ensuing years, he gave three reasons. He found it surprising and frightening that technological progress was not inventable. It could stop. It could even backslide. America had gone to the moon, but then came the grounding of the shuttle missions and an end to progress. Do we want to tell our children that going to the moon is the best we did, and then we gave up? He asked. Ancient Egyptians learned how to build the pyramids, but then that knowledge was lost. The same happened in Rome, which built aqueducts and other wonders that were lost in dark ages. What was that happening to America? People are mistaken when they think that technology just automatically improves, he would say in a TED talk a few years later. It only improves if a lot of people work very hard to make it better. Another motivation was that colonizing other planets would help ensure the survival of human colonization and consciousness in case something happened to our fragile planet. It may someday be destroyed by an asteroid or climate change or nuclear war. He had become fascinated by Fermi's paradox, named after the Italian-American physics Enrico Fermi, who in a discussion of alien life in the universe said, "But where is everyone? Mathematically, it seemed logical that there were other civilizations, but the lack of any evidence raised the uncomfortability of possibility that Earth's human species might be the only example of consciousness." We got this delicate candle of consciousness flickering here, and it may be the only instance of consciousness, so it's essential we preserve it, Musk says. If we are able to go to other planets, the probable lifespan of human consciousness is going to be far greater than if we are stuck on one planet that could get hit by an asteroid or destroy its civilization. His third motivation was more inspirational. It came from his heritage in a family of adventures and his decision as a teenager to move to a country that had bred into its essence the spirit of pioneers. The United States is literally a distillation of the human spirit of exploration, he says. This is a land of adventures. That spirit needed to be rekindled in America. He felt, and the best way to do that would be to embark on a mission to colonize Mars. To have a base on Mars would be incredibly difficult, and people will probably die along the way, just as happened in the settling of the United States. But it will be incredibly inspiring, and we must have inspiring things in the world. Life cannot be merely about solving problems, he felt. It also had to be about pursuing great dreams. That's what we can get us up in the morning. Faring to other planets would be, Musk believed, that one of the significant advances in the story of humanity. There are only a handful of really big milestones. Single called life, multicellular life, differentiation of plants and animals, life extended from the ocean to land mammals. Consciousness, he says, on that scale, the next important step is obvious, making life multiplanetary. There was something exhilarating and also a bit unnerving about Musk's ability to see his endeavors as having epoch-making significance. As Max Levitine dryly puts it, one of Elon's greatest skills is the ability to pass off his vision as a mandate from heaven. Los Angeles. Musk decided that if he wanted to start a rocket company, it was best to move to Los Angeles, which was home to most of the aerospace companies, including Lockheed and Boeing. That probability of success for a rocket company was quite low, and it was even lower if I did not move to Southern California, where the critical mass of aerospace engineer talent was. He didn't explain the move to Justine, who thought it was because he was attracted to the celebrity glamour of the city. Because of the marriage, he was eligible to become a U.S. citizen, which he did in early 2002 at an oath-taking ceremony with 3,500 other immigrants at the Los Angeles County Fairgrounds. Musk began gathering rocket engineers for meetings at a hotel near the Los Angeles airport. My initial thought was not to create a rocket company, but rather to have a philanthropic mission that would inspire the public and lead to more NASA funding. His first plan was to build a small rocket to send mice to Mars, but I became worried that he would end up with a tragicomic video of mice slowly dying on a tiny spaceship. That would not be good. So then it came down to let's send a little greenhouse to Mars. The greenhouse would land on Mars and send back photographs of green plants growing on the red planet. The public would be so excited the theory went that it would calmer for more missions to Mars. The proposal was called Mars Oasis, and Musk estimated he could pull off less for $30 million. He had the money. The biggest challenge was getting an affordable rocket that could take the greenhouse to Mars. It turned out a place where he might be able to get one cheaply, or he thought. Through the Mars Society, Musk heard of a rocket engineer named Jim Cantor who had worked on a U.S.-Russian program to decommission missiles. A month after his Long Island Expressway ride with Aldo Racer, Musk gave Cantrell a call. Cantrell was driving in Utah with the top down on his convertible. So all I could make out was that some guy named Elon Musk was saying that he was an internet millionaire who needed to talk to me. He later told Esquire when Connor got home he was able to call him back. Musk explained his vision. I want to change mankind's outlook on being a multiplanetary species, he said. Can we meet this weekend? Cantrell had been leading a cloak and dagger life because of his dealings with Russian authorities. So he wanted to meet in a safe place without guns. He suggested they meet at the Delta Airlines Club at the Salt Lake City airport. Musk bought Racy and they came up with a plan to go to Russia to see if they could buy some launch slots or rockets.